It's official. Jack Doherty's reign of terror is finally coming to an end, and what we've uncovered about his systematic downfall will leave you absolutely speechless. This isn't just another streamer drama story. We're talking about a complete empire collapse that involves criminal allegations, industry blacklisting, and revelations so devastating they could land him behind bars for decades. The internet has been buzzing for months about Jack's increasingly erratic behavior, but what nobody knew was that behind the scenes, a nuclear-level investigation was building. Sources close to the streaming community have been feeding us information that paints a picture so dark, so twisted, that even we had trouble believing it at first. But the evidence is undeniable, and the timing of everything that's happening right now is no coincidence. Here's where it gets absolutely explosive. While everyone was focused on Jack's car crashes and public meltdowns, the real story was unfolding in courtrooms, police stations, and behind closed doors with federal investigators. Multiple sources confirm that Jack Doherty is now facing potential criminal charges that could result in 10 years to life in prison. We're talking about allegations involving minors, financial exploitation, and a web of manipulation so extensive it makes other influencer scandals look like playground disputes. The most shocking part? N3ON's recent public humiliation of Jack wasn't just petty streamer beef, it was a calculated move by someone who knows exactly what's coming. Insiders claim N3ON has been sitting on information that could completely destroy Jack's remaining credibility, and the TwitchCon incident was just the beginning of a systematic takedown that's been months in the making. But that's not even the most devastating revelation. Documents obtained by multiple sources suggest that Jack's entire business model, from his OnlyFans agency to his content creation empire, has been operating under what legal experts are calling a pattern of predatory behavior. The same tactics he allegedly used to control his ex-girlfriend McKinley through contracts and manipulation have reportedly been applied to dozens of young creators who trusted him with their careers and their lives. What makes this story absolutely nuclear is the timing. Just as Jack thought he was untouchable, riding high on his controversial content and seemingly endless stream of drama, the walls started closing in from every direction. Former associates started talking. Victims found their voices, and the streaming community that once tolerated his behavior finally said enough is enough. The credibility of these allegations isn't coming from random internet trolls or jealous competitors. We're talking about testimony from people who lived in Jack's house, worked for his companies, and witnessed firsthand the systematic abuse of power that allegedly went on behind the cameras. McKinley's recent revelations about being forced to sign contracts without legal representation, being controlled down to what she could eat and wear, and being manipulated through substance abuse are just the tip of an iceberg that goes much deeper than anyone imagined. Multiple law enforcement sources confirm that investigations are ongoing, and the evidence being gathered includes financial records, communications, and testimony from individuals who were allegedly exploited by Jack's operations. This isn't speculation anymore, this is a federal case building in real time, and Jack's recent desperate attempts to maintain his image are starting to look less like confidence and more like panic. If you're already hooked by this insanity, smash that hype button, because this story gets 10x more explosive. The community has been demanding answers about Jack's behavior for years, and what we're about to reveal will finally give you the truth that mainstream media has been too scared to touch. Your hype points are literally helping us fund the kind of investigative work that exposes predators hiding behind fame and fortune. The internet turned into detectives months ago, but what they uncovered goes far beyond what anyone posted on social media. We're talking about a systematic pattern of exploitation that allegedly targeted the most vulnerable people in the content creation space. Young creators desperate for success, willing to sign anything, trust anyone, and sacrifice everything for a chance at internet fame. Let's rewind to the beginning and understand how Jack Doherty transformed from a teenage prankster into what multiple sources are now calling one of the most dangerous predators in the streaming industry. This isn't a story that started with recent controversies. This is a pattern that's been building for years, hidden behind carefully crafted content and protected by an industry that profits from chaos. Jack Doherty burst onto the scene as a young content creator with seemingly endless energy and a willingness to do anything for views. What appeared to be harmless teenage rebellion and creative risk-taking was actually, according to multiple insiders, the early stages of someone learning how to manipulate audiences, exploit situations, and push boundaries without facing consequences. Former associates describe a young man who was obsessed, not just with fame, but with control. Control over his content, his image, and, most disturbingly, the people around him. The transformation didn't happen overnight. Sources close to Jack's early career describe a gradual shift from collaborative content creation to an increasingly isolated operation, where Jack demanded complete loyalty from everyone in his circle. Friends became employees, relationships became contracts, and creative partnerships became opportunities for exploitation. One former collaborator, speaking on condition of anonymity, described the environment as cult-like, where questioning Jack's decisions or expressing concerns about his behavior would result in immediate exclusion from the group and potential legal threats. What makes Jack's story particularly disturbing is how he allegedly weaponized the dreams and desperation of young creators. The content creation industry is filled with people willing to do almost anything for a chance at success, and Jack reportedly learned early how to identify and exploit that vulnerability. Multiple sources describe a pattern where Jack would approach struggling creators, offer them opportunities that seemed too good to be true, and then gradually increase his control over their lives and careers through a combination of financial dependence, social isolation, and psychological manipulation. The character introductions in this story read like a thriller novel, but the reality is far more disturbing than fiction. McKinley Richardson, Jack's ex-girlfriend, has emerged as the primary whistleblower in what could become one of the biggest scandals in streaming history. Her recent revelations about being forced to sign contracts without legal representation, being controlled through substance abuse, and being manipulated into compromising situations paint a picture of systematic abuse that allegedly went on for months. But McKinley isn't the only victim speaking out. Sources confirm that multiple individuals who worked with Jack's OnlyFans agency have come forward with similar stories of exploitation, manipulation, and abuse. These aren't disgruntled employees looking for attention. These are people who describe being trapped in situations where their financial survival depended on Jack's approval, where their personal relationships were monitored and controlled, and where speaking out meant risking everything they had worked for. N3ON, whose real name is Rangesh Mutama, represents a different but equally important character in this story. Once considered a friend and collaborator of Jack's, N3ON has recently become one of his most vocal critics. But insiders suggest that N3ON's transformation from ally to enemy wasn't based on personal beef. It was based on knowledge of Jack's alleged criminal behavior that N3ON could no longer ignore or enable. The TwitchCon incident where N3ON publicly humiliated Jack wasn't random drama. It was reportedly a calculated move by someone who knew exactly what was coming and wanted to distance himself before the real revelations dropped. The supporting cast includes dozens of young creators who allegedly fell into Jack's orbit over the years, many of whom are now speaking to investigators about their experiences. These individuals describe a pattern of behavior that goes far beyond typical influencer drama. They describe systematic exploitation, financial manipulation, and in some cases, alleged criminal behavior that could result in serious federal charges. The timeline of events leading to this crisis reveals a pattern that should have been obvious to anyone paying attention, but was hidden behind the chaos and controversy that Jack used as camouflage for his alleged crimes. The warning signs were there for years: the increasingly desperate content, the revolving door of collaborators who would suddenly disappear from his videos, the strange contracts and business arrangements that nobody seemed to understand, and the growing isolation of Jack from the broader streaming community. The first major red flag came with Jack's OnlyFans agency, which multiple sources now describe as a front for systematic exploitation of young women desperate for financial success. The business model was simple but allegedly criminal: identify vulnerable creators, offer them management services and financial support, then gradually increase control over their lives and earnings through contracts that were designed to be impossible to escape. Legal experts who have reviewed some of these contracts describe them as unconscionable and potentially criminal in their scope and enforcement mechanisms. The second major warning sign was Jack's increasingly erratic behavior in public, which sources now suggest was the result of someone under enormous pressure, trying to maintain a facade while dealing with mounting legal and financial problems. The car crashes, the public meltdowns, the desperate attempts to create viral content. All of this was allegedly the behavior of someone who knew his empire was crumbling and was trying to generate enough revenue and attention to survive what was coming. The third and most disturbing warning sign was the pattern of young people entering Jack's orbit and then suddenly disappearing from his content without explanation. Multiple sources describe individuals who would move into Jack's house, sign contracts with his companies, and then vanish from public view after weeks or months of what insiders describe as increasingly controlling and abusive treatment. The first warning signs everyone missed were hidden in plain sight, disguised as typical influencer drama and dismissed by a community that had become numb to controversy. When former collaborators would speak out about their negative experiences with Jack, their complaints were often dismissed as jealousy or attention-seeking. When young creators would suddenly stop appearing in Jack's content, fans assumed it was normal turnover in the fast-paced world of content creation. But the most significant warning sign that everyone missed was Jack's own behavior in interviews and public appearances. Legal experts who have analyzed his public statements over the past 2 years point to numerous instances where Jack appeared to be describing criminal behavior while presenting it as normal business practices. His casual discussions of contracts that gave him control over other people's social media accounts, his descriptions of living arrangements that sound like financial coercion, and his apparent pride in his ability to manipulate and control others should have been recognized as confessions rather than bragging. The streaming community's failure to recognize and respond to these warning signs has created an environment where alleged predators can operate with impunity, protected by the assumption that all drama is just content and all controversy is just marketing. But as the legal system finally catches up with Jack Doherty, the industry is being forced to confront the reality that some behavior crosses the line from controversial content into criminal activity. But here's where it gets absolutely nuclear, and what we're about to reveal will fundamentally change how you view not just Jack Doherty, but the entire streaming industry's dark underbelly. The information we've obtained from multiple law enforcement sources, combined with testimony from victims and leaked documents, paints a picture so disturbing that even seasoned investigators have described it as one of the most systematic cases of exploitation they've ever encountered. The first bombshell revelation centers around what Jack called his OnlyFans agency, but what federal investigators are now treating as a potential sex trafficking operation. Documents obtained through sources close to the investigation reveal that Jack's business model wasn't just about taking a percentage of creators' earnings, it was about creating a system of complete control that allegedly trapped young women in situations they couldn't escape. Here's how the system allegedly worked. Jack would identify vulnerable young women, often those struggling financially or new to content creation, and offer them what seemed like an incredible opportunity. He would provide housing, equipment, marketing support, and promises of massive earnings through his proven system. But the contracts these women signed, according to legal experts who have reviewed them, were designed to create complete financial and personal dependence. The contracts allegedly gave Jack control over the creators' social media accounts, their earnings, their living situations, and even their personal relationships. Multiple sources describe situations where women were told they couldn't leave Jack's house without permission, couldn't speak to certain people, and couldn't make any business decisions without his approval. This wasn't management. This was allegedly systematic control designed to create a situation where leaving would mean losing everything. The detailed breakdown of this shocking truth gets even more disturbing when you examine the specific tactics allegedly used to maintain control. McKinley's recent revelations about being forced to sign contracts without legal representation are just one example of a pattern that multiple sources say was applied to dozens of young creators over several years. According to testimony provided to investigators, Jack would use a combination of financial manipulation, social isolation, and substance abuse to maintain control over the people in his operation. Women who tried to leave were allegedly threatened with lawsuits, told they would owe massive amounts of money, and warned that Jack would destroy their reputations in the industry. Those who stayed were allegedly subjected to increasingly demanding and degrading requirements that went far beyond normal content creation. The financial manipulation was particularly sophisticated, according to sources familiar with the operation. Jack would advance money to creators, provide them with expensive equipment and housing, and then structure their contracts so that leaving would mean owing more money than they could possibly repay. Multiple sources describe situations where women were told they owed tens of thousands of dollars and would face legal action if they tried to leave without paying. The social isolation tactics allegedly included monitoring communications, controlling who the creators could speak to, and gradually cutting them off from friends and family who might question the arrangement. Several sources describe situations where women were discouraged from maintaining relationships outside of Jack's operation and were told that people who questioned the business were haters, trying to sabotage their success. Perhaps most disturbing are the allegations about substance abuse being used as a control mechanism. Multiple sources, including McKinley, have described situations where Jack allegedly encouraged or provided drugs and alcohol to creators, then used their dependents as another form of control. This wasn't just partying, this was allegedly a calculated strategy to keep people compliant and dependent. The immediate reactions and fallout from these revelations have been swift and devastating for Jack's remaining credibility. Within hours of McKinley's first detailed interview about her experiences, multiple other women came forward with similar stories. The streaming community, which had previously dismissed concerns about Jack's behavior as drama or jealousy, suddenly found itself confronting the possibility that they had been enabling a predator. Major streaming platforms began quietly distancing themselves from Jack, with several sources confirming that his accounts are under review and his monetization has been restricted. Sponsors and business partners started pulling out of deals, and other content creators who had previously collaborated with Jack began scrubbing their social media of any association with him. The legal fallout has been even more significant. Sources close to the investigation confirm that federal authorities are treating this as a potential RICO case, meaning they're looking at Jack's operation as an organized criminal enterprise. The charges being considered allegedly include sex trafficking, financial fraud, tax evasion, and multiple counts of exploitation of minors. But perhaps the most significant immediate reaction came from within Jack's own operation. Multiple sources describe a mass exodus of employees, collaborators, and associates who suddenly found themselves distancing from someone they had previously defended. The loyalty that Jack had demanded and received for years evaporated overnight as people realized the potential legal and reputational consequences of continued association. Your hype points are literally helping us fund more investigations. Like this, hit that button if you want us to keep digging deeper. The evidence we're uncovering requires resources, time, and protection for sources who are risking everything to expose the truth. Every hype point helps us continue this vital work of holding predators accountable. The social media explosion that followed these revelations was unlike anything the streaming community had seen before. Within 24 hours, number Jack Doherty exposed was trending across multiple platforms, with thousands of people sharing their own experiences or observations about Jack's behavior. The comment sections of his old videos became graveyards of deleted comments as his team desperately tried to control the narrative. But the most telling reaction came from Jack himself. Instead of addressing the allegations directly or providing evidence to counter the claims, Jack's response was to threaten legal action against his accusers and to claim that he was the victim of a coordinated attack by jealous competitors. This response, according to legal experts, is exactly what you would expect from someone who knows the allegations are true and has no legitimate defense. The internet turned into detectives the moment McKinley's first revelations went public, but what amateur investigators uncovered was just the surface of a much deeper and more disturbing pattern. Professional investigators, working with law enforcement and legal experts, have been building a case against Jack Doherty for months. And the evidence they've gathered paints a picture of systematic criminal behavior that goes far beyond what anyone initially suspected. The investigation began not with McKinley's public statements, but with financial irregularities that caught the attention of federal authorities months earlier. Sources close to the investigation reveal that Jack's business operations had been flagged for suspicious financial activity, including large cash transactions, unusual international transfers, and tax reporting discrepancies that suggested income was being hidden or misrepresented. Multiple insider sources and leaked evidence have provided investigators with a treasure trove of documentation that allegedly proves the systematic nature of Jack's operation. These sources include former employees who kept detailed records of their experiences, financial documents that show the true scope of Jack's business operations, and communications that allegedly demonstrate the calculated nature of his exploitation tactics. One particularly damaging piece of evidence is a series of text messages allegedly sent by Jack to various creators in his operation, where he explicitly discusses strategies for maintaining control over them. These messages, according to sources who have seen them, show Jack discussing how to structure contracts to make leaving financially impossible, how to isolate creators from outside influences, and how to use personal information against them if they try to speak out. Another crucial piece of evidence is financial records that allegedly show Jack was taking far more than the agreed-upon percentage from creators' earnings and was using complex accounting methods to hide the true amount he was taking. Multiple sources describe situations where creators were told they were earning certain amounts, but the actual payments they received were significantly less, with the difference allegedly going to Jack through various hidden fees and charges. Perhaps most disturbing are the recordings and videos that sources say exist of Jack discussing his operation with associates. These recordings allegedly captured Jack describing his creators as assets rather than people, discussing strategies for preventing them from leaving, and bragging about his ability to manipulate and control vulnerable young women. The investigation has also uncovered evidence of what appears to be a network of associates who helped Jack maintain his operation. These individuals allegedly helped with recruitment, provided services to maintain control over creators, and helped hide the true nature of the business from authorities and the public. Several of these associates are now reportedly cooperating with investigators in exchange for reduced charges. Behind the scenes, power struggles within Jack's operation have provided investigators with additional evidence and witnesses. Multiple sources describe an environment where Jack's associates were constantly competing for his approval and were encouraged to report on each other's activities. This created a culture of paranoia and mistrust that ultimately worked against Jack when his operation began to collapse. The power struggles intensified as Jack's legal and financial problems mounted. Sources describe increasingly desperate attempts by Jack to maintain control over his operation, including threats against associates who showed signs of disloyalty and attempts to destroy evidence that could be used against him. These desperate actions allegedly provided investigators with additional evidence of obstruction of justice and witness intimidation. One particularly significant power struggle involved Jack's attempts to prevent McKinley from speaking out about her experiences. Multiple sources describe a campaign of intimidation and manipulation designed to keep her silent, including threats of legal action, attempts to discredit her publicly, and alleged efforts to use her personal information against her. These tactics ultimately backfired when they provided McKinley with additional evidence of Jack's abusive behavior and strengthened her resolve to speak out. The financial and legal implications of the investigation are staggering. Legal experts estimate that if Jack is convicted on all the charges being considered, he could face decades in prison and millions of dollars in fines and restitution. The financial scope of his alleged crimes includes not just the money he allegedly stole from creators, but also tax evasion, money laundering, and fraud charges that could result in additional penalties. The civil implications are equally significant. Multiple victims are reportedly preparing lawsuits against Jack that could result in millions of dollars in damages. These lawsuits are being supported by legal experts who specialize in exploitation and trafficking cases, and who believe that Jack's victims have strong cases for both compensatory and punitive damages. The investigation has also revealed the broader financial scope of Jack's operation, which allegedly generated millions of dollars in revenue over several years. Much of this money was allegedly hidden through complex financial arrangements designed to avoid taxes and hide the true scope of Jack's earnings from both authorities and his victims. But that's not even the most shocking part of this unfolding disaster. Just when investigators thought they had mapped the full scope of Jack Doherty's alleged criminal enterprise, new evidence emerged that suggests his operation was far more extensive and disturbing than anyone initially realized. The second wave of revelations has left even seasoned law enforcement officials describing this case as unprecedented in its scope and systematic nature. The most explosive new evidence centers around allegations that Jack's operation wasn't limited to adult creators, but allegedly involved minors in ways that could result in federal sex trafficking charges. Multiple sources confirm that investigators have identified several individuals who were under 18 when they first became involved with Jack's operation, and who describe experiences that legal experts say clearly constitute exploitation of minors. New evidence emerges almost daily as more victims find the courage to speak out, and more associates decide to cooperate with investigators rather than face potential criminal charges themselves. The most damaging new evidence includes financial records that allegedly show payments to minors, communications that discuss recruiting strategies targeting vulnerable young people, and testimony from witnesses who describe seeing minors in compromising situations at Jack's properties. One particularly disturbing piece of new evidence is a series of contracts that allegedly show Jack was recruiting creators as young as 16, using tactics specifically designed to target their inexperience and desperation. These contracts, according to legal experts who have reviewed them, contain provisions that would be illegal even if applied to adults, but become potentially criminal when applied to minors who cannot legally consent to such arrangements. The new evidence also includes testimony from former associates who describe Jack's alleged obsession with recruiting younger and younger creators, and his apparent belief that younger creators would be easier to control and manipulate. Multiple sources describe conversations where Jack allegedly discussed strategies for identifying and approaching minors who were struggling financially or emotionally and who might be vulnerable to his recruitment tactics. Perhaps most shocking is evidence that suggests Jack's operation may have been connected to other similar operations, creating what investigators are treating as a potential network of exploitation that extends far beyond just his individual crimes. Sources close to the investigation suggest that Jack may have been sharing information, resources, and even victims with other individuals involved in similar operations. Key players' desperate responses to these new revelations have provided investigators with additional evidence of consciousness of guilt and attempts to obstruct justice. Jack's response to the new allegations has been increasingly erratic and desperate, including attempts to discredit witnesses, destroy evidence, and flee the jurisdiction where charges are being prepared. Multiple sources describe Jack's recent behavior as that of someone who knows he's facing life-changing criminal charges and is willing to do anything to avoid accountability. This has included alleged attempts to intimidate witnesses, offers of money to people who might testify against him, and desperate attempts to create alternative narratives that might confuse potential jurors. The responses from Jack's associates have been equally telling. Multiple former employees and collaborators have suddenly distanced themselves from Jack, with several reportedly providing information to investigators in exchange for immunity from prosecution. The speed and completeness of this abandonment suggests that people who know Jack best believe the allegations against him are credible and that association with him has become legally dangerous. Even more significant has been the response from the broader streaming community, which has gone from dismissing concerns about Jack's behavior to actively working to distance itself from him. Major platforms have reportedly begun reviewing their policies regarding creators who are under investigation for serious crimes, and several have already taken steps to limit Jack's ability to monetize his content. This is the kind of content that changes industries. Show your support by hyping this video so more people see what's really happening. The streaming industry's response to these revelations will determine whether this becomes an isolated case or the beginning of a broader reckoning with exploitation and abuse in the content creation space. The public opinion shift has been dramatic and swift. Jack, who once had millions of followers and defenders, now finds himself with a rapidly shrinking base of support as more evidence emerges and more victims speak out. The comment sections of his videos have become battlegrounds where former fans express their disgust and disappointment, while his remaining supporters become increasingly isolated and defensive. Social media platforms have seen unprecedented engagement around this story, with millions of people sharing information, discussing the implications, and demanding accountability not just from Jack, but from the platforms and industry that enabled his alleged behavior. The hashtags related to this story have generated billions of impressions, making it one of the most discussed topics in streaming history. This isn't just about Jack Doherty anymore. What started as an investigation into one creator's alleged crimes has evolved into a broader examination of systematic problems within the entire content creation industry. The revelations about Jack's operation have forced platforms, agencies, and other creators to confront uncomfortable questions about how widespread these problems might be and what responsibility they bear for enabling them. The ripple effects began almost immediately after the first major revelations went public. Within days, multiple other creators found themselves facing increased scrutiny of their business practices, their relationships with younger creators, and their own potential involvement in exploitative arrangements. Several high-profile creators have already announced they are reviewing their business practices and contracts to ensure they don't contain similar problematic provisions. Industry-wide panic and changes have been swift and dramatic. Major streaming platforms have announced new policies regarding creator management companies, with several implementing enhanced background checks and oversight requirements for anyone managing other creators' accounts or finances. These changes, while welcome, have also highlighted how little oversight existed previously and how easy it was for predators to operate with impunity. Talent agencies and management companies have begun conducting internal reviews of their practices and clients, with several reportedly terminating relationships with creators whose business practices raise red flags. The legal liability for agencies that represent creators involved in exploitation has become a major concern, leading to more stringent vetting processes and contract requirements. The financial implications for the industry are staggering. Insurance companies are reportedly reviewing their policies regarding content creators and management companies, with some already increasing premiums or refusing coverage for certain types of operations. The potential legal liability for platforms that host content from creators involved in exploitation could reach into the billions of dollars. Perhaps most significantly, the revelations have sparked discussions about the need for industry-wide regulation and oversight. Multiple lawmakers have announced they are reviewing the current regulatory framework for content creation and considering new legislation that would provide better protection for creators, particularly minors, who work in this space. Other celebrities and figures affected by the fallout include dozens of creators who had previously collaborated with Jack or defended his behavior. Many of these individuals are now facing questions about what they knew and when they knew it, with some already losing sponsorships and opportunities as a result of their association with Jack. Several high-profile creators have issued public apologies for their previous support of Jack, acknowledging that they failed to recognize or respond appropriately to warning signs that are now obvious in hindsight. These apologies, while appreciated by some, have also raised questions about the culture of the streaming community and its willingness to overlook problematic behavior in the name of content and engagement. The impact has extended beyond just content creators to include sponsors, advertisers, and business partners who worked with Jack or similar operations. Multiple companies have announced they are reviewing their influencer marketing strategies and implementing new due diligence requirements to avoid association with creators involved in exploitation or abuse. Even more broadly, the scandal has affected public perception of the entire content creation industry, with many people questioning whether the pursuit of viral content and engagement has created an environment where exploitation and abuse are inevitable. This has led to decreased trust in creators generally and increased scrutiny of the industry's business practices and culture. The cultural and social implications of this scandal extend far beyond the streaming community to broader questions about how society protects vulnerable young people in the digital age. The ease with which Jack allegedly was able to identify, recruit, and exploit vulnerable creators has highlighted gaps in both legal protections and social awareness that need to be addressed. The scandal has also sparked important conversations about consent, particularly regarding young people who may not fully understand the implications of the contracts they're signing or the situations they're entering. Legal experts have pointed out that the current framework for protecting minors in the entertainment industry may not be adequate for the digital content creation space. Perhaps most importantly, the revelations have empowered other victims of exploitation in the content creation space to speak out about their experiences. Multiple sources report that the courage shown by McKinley and other victims in Jack's case has inspired dozens of other people to come forward with their own stories of exploitation and abuse by other creators and industry figures. The social media response has been unprecedented, with millions of people engaging in discussions about consent, exploitation, and the responsibility of platforms and audiences to protect vulnerable creators. These conversations have led to increased awareness of warning signs and red flags that might indicate exploitative relationships or business arrangements. Where everyone stands now reads like a disaster movie in real time, with Jack Doherty's empire continuing to crumble while investigators build what sources describe as an airtight case that could result in decades of prison time. The current status of the investigation reveals a man who went from internet celebrity to federal target in a matter of months, with new evidence and witnesses emerging almost daily. Jack himself has largely disappeared from public view, with his social media accounts going dark and his usual stream of controversial content grinding to a halt. Sources close to the situation describe someone who is completely panicked and spending most of his time with lawyers trying to develop a defense strategy for charges that legal experts say will be extremely difficult to beat. The few public statements Jack has made have been through his legal team, who have issued generic denials and claims that their client is the victim of a coordinated smear campaign. However, legal experts point out that these statements have been notably vague and have failed to address specific allegations or provide alternative explanations for the evidence that has been made public. McKinley, meanwhile, has become something of a hero to many in the streaming community for her courage in speaking out against Jack's alleged abuse. She has continued to provide information to investigators and has been working with victim advocacy groups to help other survivors of similar exploitation. Her transformation from victim to advocate has been inspiring to many and has helped encourage other victims to come forward. The latest developments and updates continue to paint an increasingly dire picture for Jack's legal and financial future. Multiple sources confirm that federal investigators have executed search warrants at several properties associated with Jack, seizing computers, financial records, and other evidence that could be crucial to building their case. The most recent development involves allegations that Jack attempted to flee the country, only to be stopped at the airport when authorities flagged his passport. While this hasn't been officially confirmed, multiple sources suggest that Jack's travel has been restricted as part of the ongoing investigation, and that he is essentially trapped in the jurisdiction where charges are being prepared. Financial records obtained by investigators allegedly show that Jack has been desperately trying to move money offshore and hide assets that could be subject to seizure if he's convicted. These efforts have reportedly been largely unsuccessful, with authorities able to freeze most of his known accounts and assets pending the outcome of the investigation. Perhaps most significantly, sources close to the investigation report that several of Jack's former associates have agreed to testify against him in exchange for immunity or reduced charges. These witnesses allegedly have first-hand knowledge of Jack's operation and can provide testimony that would be devastating to any defense strategy. The streaming platforms that once hosted Jack's content have taken increasingly aggressive action to distance themselves from him. His monetization has been suspended on multiple platforms, his content has been demonetized or removed entirely, and his ability to create new accounts has been severely restricted. We're about to reveal the most shocking part, but first, if this expose has blown your mind, give it the hype it deserves. The ongoing legal drama is providing us with new information almost daily, and your support helps us continue to investigate and report on these crucial developments that the mainstream media is still afraid to touch. The ongoing legal and professional consequences for Jack continue to mount. Multiple civil lawsuits have been filed against him by former victims, with legal experts predicting that the total damages could reach into the tens of millions of dollars. These lawsuits are being funded by legal advocacy groups and are being handled by attorneys who specialize in exploitation and trafficking cases. The professional consequences have been equally severe. Jack has been blacklisted by most major brands and sponsors, his merchandise sales have collapsed, and his ability to generate income through his content has been severely compromised. Multiple sources describe someone who went from earning millions of dollars per year to facing potential bankruptcy and decades in prison. Even more damaging has been the complete collapse of Jack's social network and support system. Former friends, collaborators, and associates have almost universally distanced themselves from him, leaving him isolated and without the resources and connections that once protected him from consequences. The ongoing drama continues to generate massive public interest, with millions of people following every development in the case. Social media engagement around the story remains at unprecedented levels, with new revelations and developments generating millions of views and comments within hours of being reported. What's coming next in the Jack Doherty saga will likely reshape not just his life, but the entire landscape of content creation and influencer culture. Legal experts who have been following the case predict that the formal charges against Jack will be filed within the next few weeks, and that the evidence gathered by investigators will result in what one prosecutor described as one of the most significant exploitation cases in the history of social media. The charges being prepared allegedly include multiple counts of sex trafficking, financial fraud, tax evasion, and exploitation of minors. If convicted on all charges, Jack could face a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Legal experts point out that the systematic nature of his alleged crimes and the number of victims involved make this exactly the type of case that federal prosecutors use to send a message to others who might be tempted to engage in similar behavior. But the legal case is just the beginning of what promises to be a years-long process of accountability and industry reform. Multiple sources predict that Jack's case will inspire similar investigations into other creators and management companies, potentially uncovering a network of exploitation that extends far beyond just his individual crimes. The civil lawsuits against Jack are expected to result in massive financial judgments that will likely bankrupt him and serve as a warning to others in the industry. Legal experts predict that these cases will establish important precedents for holding creators and management companies accountable for exploitation and abuse, potentially changing the entire legal landscape for the industry. Perhaps most significantly, Jack's case is expected to inspire new legislation and regulation specifically targeting the content creation industry. Multiple lawmakers have already announced they are drafting bills that would provide better protection for creators, particularly minors, and would establish oversight mechanisms to prevent similar exploitation in the future. The industry response is expected to be swift and comprehensive. Major platforms are reportedly developing new policies and oversight mechanisms that would make it much more difficult for predators to operate with impunity. These changes, while overdue, represent a fundamental shift in how the industry approaches creator safety and accountability. Unresolved mysteries and questions continue to emerge as the investigation progresses, suggesting that the full scope of Jack's alleged crimes may not be known for months or even years. One of the biggest unresolved questions involves the potential network of associates and collaborators who may have helped Jack maintain his operation, and whether similar operations exist elsewhere in the industry. Investigators are reportedly still trying to determine the full financial scope of Jack's operation and how much money was stolen from victims over the years. The complex financial arrangements and offshore accounts allegedly used by Jack have made this process extremely difficult, but sources suggest that the total amount could be in the tens of millions of dollars. Another major unresolved question involves the potential involvement of other high-profile creators or industry figures in Jack's operation. While no other major figures have been formally implicated, sources suggest that the investigation has uncovered connections and relationships that could lead to additional charges against other individuals. Potential future revelations could include evidence of similar operations run by other creators, testimony from additional victims who have not yet come forward, and financial evidence that could implicate other individuals or companies in Jack's alleged crimes. Sources close to the investigation suggest that what has been revealed so far may be just the tip of the iceberg. The most significant potential revelation involves the possibility that Jack's operation was connected to other similar operations, creating what investigators are treating as a potential network of exploitation that could involve dozens of creators and hundreds of victims. If this proves to be true, it could result in one of the largest criminal cases in the history of social media. There's also the possibility that evidence will emerge showing that platforms, agencies, or other industry figures knew about Jack's alleged crimes and failed to take appropriate action. Such evidence could result in additional criminal charges and massive civil liability for companies that enabled or ignored the exploitation. Final community engagement and subscription drive. This story represents everything our channel stands for: fearless investigation, protection of victims, and accountability for those who abuse their power and influence. The Jack Doherty case isn't just about one predator finally facing justice. It's about an entire industry being forced to confront its failures and implement real change to protect vulnerable creators. Your engagement with this content, your hype points, and your support have been crucial in helping us investigate and report on this story. The mainstream media was too scared to touch this story when we first started reporting on it, but your support gave us the resources and platform to continue digging until the truth came out. The comment section has been absolutely incredible throughout this investigation, with many of you providing tips, sharing your own experiences, and helping us connect dots that we might have missed. This is exactly the kind of community-driven journalism that can create real change and hold powerful people accountable for their actions. As this story continues to develop, we'll be here to provide you with the latest updates, analysis, and exclusive information that you won't find anywhere else. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because the developments in this case are happening fast, and you don't want to miss any of the shocking revelations that are still to come. The Jack Doherty story is far from over, and what happens next will determine whether this becomes an isolated case of justice finally being served or the beginning of a broader reckoning that transforms the entire content creation industry. Either way, we'll be here to document every shocking development, every courtroom drama, and every moment of accountability that victims like McKinley have been fighting for.